Hello everyone, my name is Xianghun Elvis Cao. Right now I'm a PhD candidate in the CP School of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at Cornell University. I'm working with Professor Daryl Erickson. And today I would like to share with you our research work from the numerical simulation perspective. And the title for my talk today is Multiphysics Modeling and Optimization of a Glass Waveguide-based Photothermal Reactor for CO2 Reduction. I'll be introducing our research from three sections. In the first section of my talk, I will go through some background in CO2 conversion and then identify the research gap in reactor engineering. In the second section, I will go through some simulation activities and share with you the key results from the numerical simulations. Lastly, I will give the conclusions of our research and provide some outlook for future directions. So, some background. Everybody talks about global warming, and here is a map of our global temperature right now. As you can see, blue means low temperature, yellow means medium temperature, and red means high temperature. And here is where we study from 140 years ago in 1880. Now, let's see a very short video by NASA. As you can see, this actually shows how the global temperature changes. It is very clear that global warming is happening, and most of the warming occurred in the past 35 years. There's a lot of published papers that have already correlated CO2 conversion increase with the rise of global temperature. As scientists and engineers, we seek to make use of technology to reimagine CO2 emissions as a resource, not as a liability. So let's see what nature has already done. Looks like nature has already have a well-established system to deal with CO2, and this is called photosynthesis. Basically, they convert CO2, water, and sunlight into the food the plants use to grow. The pathway we are pursuing at Cornell is to mimic photosynthesis inside a factory or power plant. We are working on a reactor technology called HELICAL that acts like a leaf to convert CO2 into solar fuels. We seek to achieve a kind of artificial synthesis by combining sunlight, CO2, and other reactants to photothermal-catalytically produce renewable fuels. The basic chemistry and idea are the same, to convert CO2 and energy as input into something energetically more useful. The eventual goal is to convert waste CO2 emissions into solar fuels and feedstocks that we use every day, and the whole process is powered by solar. As mechanical engineers, we seek to contribute to the CO2 conversion field using our own expertise, that is on reactor engineering. Earlier last year, the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, they published a report called Gaseous Carbon Waste Stream Utilization, Status, and Research Needs. In this report, they have a key finding that research on catalysts for CO2 conversion is often conducted using reactors and reaction conditions that are not suitable for the economic large-scale synthesis of chemicals or fuels at reasonable rates. The factors that affect catalyst performance in simplified laboratory reactors may differ from those that affect performance in a reactor engineered for large scale and higher rates. Based on this, they have a recommendation saying researchers should integrate catalysis research with reactor design and early stage to accelerate the development of CO2 conversion processes by rapidly identifying the factors that affect catalyst performance on large scales and synthetically relevant rates. So we see a lot of people contribute already to catalyst research, but there still exists a research gap in reactor engineering, and that's why we want to design a reactor that is scalable and can be upscaled. So in this figure, I'm going to introduce our reactor platform. On the left-hand side of the slide, you can see our photoreactor in operation. And then inside of the reactors, we put a lot of waveguides inside to help engineer the way the light is being delivered, to make sure all of the light can be delivered to the surface of the catalyst. On the right-hand side is a small video. As you can see, this is a sampling video, and the key part inside is the waveguides that will help the transfer of the light to the right place. Right now, the article is being under review and is already being posted to the SSRN preprint platform. We first conducted a series of experiments, and using that experimental data, we actually calibrated the constants involved in our numerical models. On this slide here, you can see the geometry and boundary conditions for our reactor setup, a very traditional one. And since the reactor structure is symmetrical, we are only simulating half of the full reactor. The boundary conditions are, first, for the inlet, we're adopting a velocity boundary condition. The outlet is a zero pressure boundary condition. For all of the other walls in the reactor, we are using a non-slip wall condition. During the experiments, we were actually conducting the reverse water gas shift reaction. In that reaction, CO2 and hydrogen react and will form carbon monoxide and water. So after experimental calibration to get the constants for the models, we conducted the grid independence test. We studied the 4 different sizes of the elements, and the number of elements for the coarse mesh is around 2.5 million, and for the finest mesh, that's around 14 million. And then we compare the major outputs for the simulations, which is the pressure drop and the carbon monoxide concentration and outlet. And then based on this, we choose the medium mesh size for our follow-up studies. So in our simulations, we actually studied 3 operating parameters, including flow rates, catalyst mass, and light intensity. And then we focus on 2 things as the output. First is the CO concentration distribution, and then is the pressure drop, so that they can be related to practical applications. As you can see from this slide, as the flow rate increased from 10 to 20 to 40 and then to 300 milliliter per minute, the concentration for the carbon monoxide and outlet will decrease if you compare the same scale bar. That is also expected because there's not enough catalyst in this setting. Then let's look at the effect of flow rates on pressure distribution. As you can see from the C figure, the scale bar is also the same. If you directly compare the 2 extreme cases, the 10 ml per minute with 300 ml per minute, for these two, the pressure and the outlet is always 0, so we fix that value. And if you compare the 2 colors between 10 and 300, the pressure drop for the 300 is definitely much higher than 10 ml per minute. That's because in this case, you need more pump energy to make sure the liquid can reach the outlet. That being said, this case in a practical setting is not good because you have to have a lot of pump energy to make sure the flow can flow through the whole reactor. We already chatted about this in the last 2 slides, but here is a summary of the effects of flow rates. On the left-hand side, you can see the effect of overall flow rates on absolute CO yield, as well as the relative CO2 conversion. You can see pretty clearly that the effect is quite the opposite, which is also expected. On the right-hand side, that is the effect of flow rates on pressure drop, as well as the mean velocity. We chatted about this in the past slide. When you increase the concentration, the flow rates, the pressure drop will also be higher. You need more pump energy. Then we study the effect of catalyst mass. So different from the flow rates, the catalyst mass will not affect the pressure distribution. So here we only focus on how it affects the CO concentration distribution. we studied 6 levels for the catalyst mass from 6.25 milligram to 100 milligram. And if you directly compare these two, you can see if the catalyst mass is 100 and 100, the concentration for the CO and outlet will definitely be much higher than the 6.25 case. That is also expected because you fix the flow rates. There's a certain amount of CO2, but you have a lot of catalyst mass available in the reactor. So here is the summary of the effect of catalyst mass. With the increase of the catalyst mass, they will actually have the opposite effects on the absolute CO yield and the relative CO2 conversion. Then we studied the effect of light intensity. It's pretty similar to the effect of catalyst mass because they will not affect the pressure field distribution. They will only affect the CO concentration distribution. Here actually shows the summary of the effect of light intensity. With the increased light intensity, the absolute CO yield as well as the CO2 relative conversion, they will both increase. So in addition to the 3 operating parameters we studied above, we also studied the effect of BAFFLE numbers and configurations, which is a design parameter. Since BAFFLEs is a key component we introduced into our shell and tube waveguide-based reactor. And here on the left-hand side, you can see we studied different numbers of plate baffles from 0 to 2 to 6 to 10. And then we fixed the baffle numbers to 6. And for the plate baffles, we changed the openings from 60% to 75% to 90%. On the right-hand side is the helical baffle. It's a totally different configuration. We studied the 1 ton and 2 tons and 3 tons. And this figure actually shows all of the geometries for the designs that are involved in our study. So this slide shows the effect of baffle numbers is a key summary. As you can see from the figure in the middle, with the increase of baffle numbers, both the absolute CO yield and the relative CO2 conversion they will have a slight increase, but at the sacrifice of pressure drop. So if you have more baffles inside, the pressure drop is going to be great. So if you need more pump energy, which is a trade-off of the productivity. Then we fix the numbers of the plate baffles to 6, and then we study the effect of plate baffle configuration. Basically, it's just 3 different kinds of percentages of the baffles, and ranging from 60% to 75% to 90%. They have a pretty similar trend like the baffle numbers. This slide shows the effect of helical baffle configurations. As you can see, with the increase of number of tons, the productivity they will have a slight increase, and these productivity levels they are similar to that in using the plate baffles. But if you compare the pressure drop, the helical baffles they will have a slightly lower pressure drop compared with plate baffles. So the helical baffle will be a pretty interesting direction to pursue if you want to maximize the productivity and to minimize the pressure drop. Some key conclusions. We studied different operating parameters and design parameters, and we calibrated the model using experimental data. Of the 3 operating parameters, they actually have a higher impact on CO yield compared with the design parameters. And compared with the plate baffles, the helical baffles, they have comparable carbon monoxide yield with relatively lower pressure drop, which means they can be a pretty interesting next step to study. So with that, I would like to thank our group members, especially my advisor, Professor David Erickson, and our collaborator in Tobias Harris' team. And I would also like to thank the founders and our collaboration partner, Dimension Energy. So I'm open to all the questions. Thanks for your attention.